This is Betty Tootle for the Hastings World War II Oral History Project on May 31st, 1995. I am interviewing Stephan Wittman at the cottage at 41 Washington Avenue. Before we go into your World War II experiences, well, we've already done that, so I'll go right into the questioning. Okay. Did you enlist?
No, I was drafted.
Okay. Did other members of your family serve in the war?
Yeah, they both enlisted. My brother and my sister, all three of us were in service. My sister was a nurse and my brother was in the Merchant Marine.
Were there any conscientious objectors in Hastings?
I don't know whether there were any conscientious objectors, but I do know that there were quite a considerable number of the young men I went to school with who were deferred for supposedly defense purposes. However, I was most chagrined when I came back to work. And whom did I find to be my boss? But a fellow also worked for the bank. And he was a member of the National Guard down on Park Avenue, the elite stocking district, National Guard down there. He was a lieutenant. And he, in addition to working in a bank, he came up to Anaconda to work one night a week up at Anaconda for a couple hours. He thereby was granted an exemption as being necessary for the war work. And of course, he got to be my boss, but I found that experience to be extremely distasteful. However, he was a very nice fellow, but sometimes it sort of got to your gut, you know.
Did you choose a branch of the military?
Oh, no, far from it. The service told me what to do, when and how.
Where did you go for your basic training?
Basic training went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
How long were you down? Did it last, basic training?
Well, basic training was about 6 to 8 weeks. And then I was selected to go to OCS, and I went to school there for another 4 weeks. They sent me out to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And from there I went back to Fort Bragg again. And there I was sent up to the 45th Division, which was then in Watertown, New York. Used to be called Pine Camp, and then subsequently Fort Drum.
Briefly discuss your war service, including locations and any actions. So just.
Well, talking about Camp Drum in the 45th, when I came in with my orders, I went to division headquarters, and lo and behold, I was waiting at the counter there. Who did I see but John Borowitz? And he came over, and we had a pretty good time talking together. I again seen John a few times. Of course, John was in division headquarters while I was in a battalion. And we kept, whenever we had a chance, we came across each other, mostly in rest periods. We would get to reminisce just a little bit. But he was the only one from Hastings in the whole division besides myself. I see John just passed away a few months ago. He was out in California.
Where did you go from Fort Drum?
From there we went down to Virginia, Camp Blackstone, and subsequently we shipped out of Newport News and got onto some of the old freighters down there. The one I was on was the old Harry Lee, which was also on World War I, served as a troop ship and subsequently as a freighter. Had a list to it, and we went all the way down to below the equator, down southern Brazil, and crossed the South Atlantic. We were in a convoy of perhaps 80, 90 ships. It was zigzag all the way. And on the way up, alongside the coast of Africa, we could see Casablanca, Dakar, some of those other cities there. And going through the Straits of Gibraltar, shortly after going through the Straits, who did we hear over the ship's radio but Axis Sally? She said, "Hello, members of the 45th Division. We already blew our cover as far as the Germans were concerned. We pulled into Iran there for a couple of days, and then was after a mock amphibious practice landing, we were on land for about 2 weeks to get our feet back again, because we were on ship for almost 4 weeks, 3.5 weeks, and we had to get our feet back into shape again before the amphibious landing of Sicily. But we were originally scheduled to invade the island of Crete, not Sicily. And our gear was all packed up for rough mountain climbing. As a matter of fact, in addition to our 105 howitzers, we had some 75 millimeter pack howitzers, which were used in World War I, because the steep cliffs in Crete, we figured went and get the big guns up high hills. However, Sicily was, although hilly, was nothing like Crete. However, that led to problems because we was on board the ship. We were learning what you might call pig Greek, a little bit of Greek here and there. And then, of course, we didn't have much time to learn much Italian, and we mixed it too, and lo and behold, when you did land in Sicily, you found out the people in Sicily don't really speak Italian, they speak Sicilian. And not only that, to make matters worse, people on one hill would have a dialect somewhat different from people on another hill only 2-3 miles away. So we had a hard time with the Italians, but we managed.
And then you went on from Sicily to...
From Sicily, we managed to get to with Patton. Patton was a great driver of men, and the soldiers liked Patton, even though they hated his guts, they liked to fight with him. And we got to the spot in Sicily where the channel is very narrow at the toe of Italy there. And of course, Patton was waiting for the British to come up the east coast of Sicily. And he sat there in City Hall watching the British come into the city. And lo and behold, we were already in there having paraded and everything else. Of course, Montgomery was rather incensed, but Patton had hid his guts, and that didn't leave us too friendly with the British. Unfortunately, although the British soldiers and the British and the American soldiers were always very close back. The strange part about it is the British were clothed in shorts, like khaki uniforms. And by the time they got to the end of the campaign in Sicily, all their legs are bloody cut from the brush and stuff on the sides of the hills. And of course, in Sicily, the roads are paved with the volcanic ash from Mount Etna.
Oh, yeah.
And no matter where you go, there's dust. If the tank is down the road, there's a cloud of dust that keeps flying maybe half a mile long, you know. And they were all full of this ash right onto the skids, whereas the ash went right onto our woolens. And we were cooler with the effect of the sun on the wool had a cooling effect. The evaporation cooled your body more. So the British were surprised to see how comfortable we were. Of course, from there we had waiting for our next hop. We had problems with the soldiers. They would buy vegetables and sometimes fruit from some of the Italians passing in the donkey carts. They had these donkey carts in Sicily, two-wheel donkey carts. I don't know if you've ever seen them, all painted gaily.
I've seen pictures of them.
You know, and of course with the vegetables, they're grown with human manure in Sicily, and that led to awful diarrhea on the part of the farmers. We had problems there trying to get that straightened out. We had to move everybody, men and everybody else, up to the mountains to get away from any contact with civilians until we got straightened out, because we had to prepare for the invasion of Italy proper. And so we, on our way to Italy, in the invasion, the night before we landed, we had a surprise announcement on the radio, and that was that the Italian government decided to give up on the Germans, and they surrendered.
Oh, my.
So that was good news.
Yes.
It was good news, and it was bad. It wasn't that good, because we were fighting the Italians there in Sicily, but unfortunately the Italians are not good fighters. They may be good other things, good lovers or something like that, but fighters, they're plain putrid. Excuse the expression. But, in the landing, we were most surprised to find the Germans with maps denoting the beaches on which we were going to land. They had every one of the beaches, red, white, yellow, all marked on the maps. They were waiting precisely for us right there. We had quite a time with the British on our left and the 36th on the right. The 36th suffered quite a few casualties. We were supposedly a reserve combat regiment, not the entire division went. And before we knew it, we ourselves, the whole combat team, was encircled by the Germans. We were supposed to meet the British and the 36th at one point halfway up these hills. They never showed up, but the Germans did. Fortunately, we broke out. And after we did that, Lieutenant General Clark called the division commanders together, and he wanted to prepare for a retreat. And our division general said, retreat to where? We've only got about a mile behind us, it's the ocean. Where are we going to retreat to? And he said, told Clark, he said, give me enough ammunition and enough food, And she says, we can stand up to any amount of Germans. And of course, Clark was highly incensed. But the Division General Middleton told Clark that there's no place to go to. It'd be a worse slaughter than Dunkirk. So I guess Clark finally seen the light, but of course that made for some very bad feelings between Clark and our division general. However, Eisenhower learned about that later on. And when we approached the Gustav line up there in the wintertime, our division general was recalled back to headquarters in England, Shape headquarters, and he was made commanding general of the 10th Corps. He was made a lieutenant general. Evidently his fight with Clark reached the right ears. But after about 3 weeks, we finally broke out of the beachhead, to the surprise of the Germans also. But we took Naples and some of the other cities up in there, and we went up to what was known as the Gustav line at that time. That was a series of mountain ranges where the Italians every year held their maneuvers. So they knew precisely how to defend that. And of course the Germans took over there, and we were about a mile away from Monte Cassino. We had a place, perhaps even higher than Monte Cassino, was named Monte Croce. There would be some, just overlooking this town of Venafro. That was quite a climb up to the top of it. There was no road to the top of it. We had to use donkeys to carry the food and ammunition and supplies to get up there. However, the artillery didn't go up. The artillery stood down just at the foot of the hill. We stood there past New Year. Of course, New Year we had New Year's Eve. We had some snow.
What year was that? That New Year's?
That was in 43, 44. So we spent Christmas and New Year there on the Gustav line, and shortly thereafter, about the 10th of January or so, we were relieved by the Polish troops, and they subsequently took over at the Abbey. They're the ones that wrested Monte Cassino from the Germans. As a matter of fact, there's a big cemetery there that I visited in '84. There were over 6,000 Polish dead there. Of course, that was slaughter going on.
I know.
But if we recall back to the Naples area, we prepared for the invasion of Anzio. Anzio initially was a cake, so to speak. We just walked into it. There was hardly a German around. However, that didn't last too long. Hitler ordered what he called the abscess removed. And of course...
that's my remembrance, that Anzio was pretty bad.
And Anzio was quite a place for concentrated fire. Perhaps the most intense anti-aircraft guns there. Up to that time, it was considered the most intense in the world. However, that after considerable fighting in the early part of February, we lost a considerable number of troops. However, the Germans lost far more than we did. The Germans were burying their dead using tractors, and they would just lay the bodies like cords of wood.
Oh.
They had to. They just couldn't bury them. You can't let bodies lay around while men are still fighting there. It's demoralizing and it breeds disease. And of course, eventually, on June 5th, we did take Rome. And we were then relieved of any duties, but before we were relieved, I can still remember the day we took Rome. We were to the left of Rome. The artillery was positioned right on the Tiber River. And at Anzio-Nettuno, they had taken all the civilians and all the animals back down towards Naples because of the intense fire there. And of course, when the GIs got that close to where there were women, that brought a few problems. But anyway, I just came in after being out for 3 days as a forward observer, didn't get much sleep at night. And I fell asleep right next to the gun position. And I was awakened by a call from the battalion headquarters, and one of the fellows shook me, woke me up, said, "Lieutenant, battalion wants you." I got on the phone and we were ordered to what they call battery commanders forward to reconnaissance for a new position. And I looked around for the rest of the officers, including the captain, couldn't find one. They had all taken off from Rome. And the film was right straight down the road, about eight miles. Well, anyway.
You were a lieutenant then?
Yeah, I got the battery together. And we did go. We did move into a new position, and we were all ready to fire and so forth. And I got a call the next morning from the colonel. He wanted me to go up to headquarters. First thing he asked me, he says, "Where are all the officers?" I says, "Colonel," I says, "I don't know." I says, I fell asleep when I came in from being an FO, and I said, "I presume you might find them in Rome." He said, "I want you to get 10 trucks." And he said, "I want you to go to Rome and get all those guys." I says, "Colonel," I says, "Rome is a big city. How am I going to find all those guys?" He says, "Simple." He says, "You get into Rome," and he says, "You collar a couple Roman policemen. You put them in that truck and you tell them what you're there for." And he says, "They'll show you where to find the fellas." Which I did. Surprising, the colonel was rather sharp.
Yeah.
The trucks were loaded and the guys were only too glad to go back home again. They were hungry, they were looking for something good to eat and so forth. They couldn't get much there in Rome. And we got back to the outfit. It was perhaps the laugh of the season. And of course, while we were waiting to move to a rear area, we were treated to Irving Berlin. Irving Berlin happened to come into Rome. And it was quite a treat. We were all lined up there. He was at the Opera House there. And I can remember the Corps MPs they were just threatening the fellows to stay in line, a nice line. This and you just come by. We're dirty and everything else from combat and everything else. And here's guys come walking around here telling us to line up and stay in a straight line. Well, lo and behold, there was a nice fountain down the street. Rome is known for its fountains. And the MP sort of overdid it. And lo and behold, we broke ranks, picked up the MPs and dumped them in the fountain. But anyway, we had a great time with Irving Berlin. I'll remember it forever. it was just great.
I'll bet it.
Singing some of his songs and so forth. And of course, from there we went to a rest area down near Salerno where we first invaded. And we practiced our amphibious training and got ready for the amphibious landing of southern France. So we shoved off there, and the day before the landing we were, you might say, parked right between the islands of Corsica and Sardinia. And we were swimming around the boats. I was on an LCI, which is a landing craft infantry. That thing just bobs in the water like that. It holds maybe 150 to 200 men. It's used to get the infantry onto the beach in a hurry. Of course, we also had in the convoy LSTs, which had tanks and stuff on them. But this time we were in the smaller, I was in the smaller LCIs. And we approached France. We were on the left of the invasion force. I could see Saint-Tropez on the left. It was about 4 miles from the left. In the morning, you could just see the outskirts of Saint-Tropez. And once we ran up onto the beach, I was the first one off. I went down the ladder, and as soon as I stepped off the ladder, I went in over my head, and I couldn't even see my hand. So I had to get back up the ladder again and tell the ship's captain that it was impossible to land over the fellows' heads. I said, furthermore, would you get soaked beyond reason? Of course, the Navy was hesitant and wanting to back out because what they do is they throw out an anchor before they look there, and they winch themselves back off the shore because they're stuck up on shore. And it meant they would have to stay there for about another half hour, another hour before they pulled offshore again. The Navy wanted to get out of there in a hurry. But needless to say, they did do it, and we got up a little closer to shore, only about 2 or 3 feet of water. But it was a spot that I revisited in '84. My brother married a French girl when he was up in Norway. This is after the war. And of course, when he retired, he went back to France. It lives just outside of Paris. And of course, they took us around to all the spots that I was at during the war. And after leaving Saint-Tropez, we went along this coastal road, looking for the spot. I told my brother, slow down. I think this is it. My wife noticed a marble marker on the road. The 45th Division landed on this spot. It was really something. I took my shoes and socks off and rolled my pants up and went out in the water. But the landing in southern France was reasonably easy. I wouldn't say it was easy, but it was reasonably easy, much easier than the ones except Anzio. And we did make good progress in southern France. As a matter of fact, one day we went a total of more than 100 miles in one day. But of course, getting up around Lyon was the second largest city in France. The Germans were there in force, they were ensconced, and they had a good supply of most everything. As a matter of fact, in the Rhone Valley itself, we proceeded up to Durance Valley, which parallels the Rhone. The Germans were going up the Rhone, but we cut up the Durance, cutting them off in the Rhone Valley. And what happened, the Air Force then bombed them in the Rhone Valley. And surprisingly, they had an awful lot of horse-drawn artillery and horse-drawn carts. There were dead horses all along the whole route of the Rhone Valley. The stench from the dead horses was just horrible. But we went up to some of the cities up there, and in one town there near the border, one of our division majors was captured by the Germans, and he convinced the German commander that the Americans had 3 armored divisions with them, and we would pocket them right there between France and Switzerland. Well, lo and behold, the next morning, who comes marching down the road right in front of us, but a French nun. She was a prioress of the convent, and behind her was a German general and about 12,000 German troops.
Oh my.
So that
Germany?
No, not yet. We were still in France.
Uh-huh.
Now, in France, and just west of Dijon, and it's a great grape growing area there in France. We teamed up with Patton's Third Army cutting over from the coast. And we had the Germans trapped, both from east to west and north to south. And from there, we went up and the division crossed not only the Maginot Line, but the Siegfried Line, the Sawtooth Line, and Christmas was rather dismal because of the problems in Bastogne. The Americans thinned their line extremely to help relieve the garrison at Bastogne. As a matter of fact, Patton and his men went right up to Bastogne. And between us and the German troops at places, there were gaps of maybe 10 to 12 miles. There was absolutely no soldier at all. Well, we were in Germany anyway at Christmas Eve. And Christmas Eve, it started to snow, and there was a midnight mass in that town. But of course, civilians weren't allowed to go on the streets at night. So we went down the hill in the snow. Of course, there were no street lights. And luckily, there's enough light to find the church. In the church, the only light came from the 6 candles on the altar, 6 high candles. You couldn't see who was alongside of you. It might have been a German, but I don't think it was any Germans. All you had heard was the soldiers coming in was a clunk of the rifle falling on the stone floor of the church. And of course, after service, it was quiet as all the dickens. We went back to our respective positions. But it wasn't long before we were pulled back. because of the problems in and around Bastogne.
Mm.
Shortly, the day after New Year, we were told to try to locate elements in the 42nd Division. That's a New York outfit, the Rainbow Division. And of course, we went totaling about 80 miles before we teamed up, well, maybe 70, teamed up with the elements of the 42nd Division. We were just going and going. We didn't know what we were hitting, where the Germans were, or anything like that. We were forbidden to light any fires, or light any cigarettes or anything. It was cold. The men were complaining it was cold. They wanted to light fires to keep warm, but it was rather hard telling them they couldn't light fires. But anyway, we finally did make contact with elements. However, the next day, we were sort of trapped ourselves because elements of the, 6th SS German Mountain Division had come down from Finland. And they got a hold of us right there. Fortunately, the artillery and elements of the infantry did happen to break out, and we got on the other side of the pocket. However, for 2 days, a good sized portion of our men were pocketed by the Germans. As a matter of fact, some of our own men were in a house with German headquarters in it, and they were up in the attic, and they could peep down into some of the holes, and you could see the Germans downstairs.
Oh.
And I knew the men were in there, and of course, the general of the 42nd Division wanted us to fire on them, on the town. And I refused to fire on the town. Of course, I stood a chance of being court-martialed, but I was asked for an explanation. And I told them, it's common knowledge in our fellows that we have at least 200 or so men still in the village. And they're hiding in all different places. The Germans just haven't found them. I said I would kill more of our own men than I would kill the Germans by firing in there, because in most places they were up in the attics, up high, they would get the fire first. So I said fire all around the village, but I'm not going to fire on it. Not unless I can get somebody to direct specific fire right in the village. So they didn't mind that too much. I got away with that one. Eventually, we were successful, and we did in turn trap elements of that division. And the Germans were very much surprised, but
you weren't wounded at all in all this activity.
I was extremely lucky.
I would say so.
I was fortunate. Always. And from there we moved up to a position. We were already in the Alsace, but we were subsequently relieved by the 42nd Division and once more regroup and get ready for the push into the Saar Valley.
Oh.
And it was there we really caught the Germans. And in one day, I remember, if I forget the exact day, I got it here somewhere, we captured over 2,055 prisoners on March 21st.
What year was that?
Well, that was 1945.
45, oh, you were getting...
March 21st, 1945. Because I had already spent 2 Christmases overseas. First Christmas in Italy, the second Christmas I mentioned in Germany. And the Saar was a place where we caught the Germans who were extremely disorganized. And it helped us in preparing for the crossing of the Rhine, which we subsequently did. We crossed near Worms, and after crossing the Rhine, of course, there's a confluence of the Rhine and the main rivers. We had to also cross the main river. And the main river was just about as stubborn as was the Rhine, perhaps even more so. And we proceeded down towards the heart of, you might say, the Nazi birthplace down around Nuremberg and in those areas. And on the way towards there, just before we crossed the Danube River, where you mentioned you heard of the ball bearing plants that were especially critical to the Germans for the airplanes and the tanks and so forth. There was a town, a city of Schaffenburg. And in Schaffenburg, there was a SS major, and he had about 100 SS men under him, besides, of course, the whole German garrison. But he threatened the German soldiers and the German population that if any one of them retreated or tried to get away from the city, they would be shot. We went into the city and we found ourselves fighting civilians also. The civilians were dropping all types of bombs on us from rooftops, from second floor windows and so forth. So rather than killing civilians outright, we pulled back and we sent a soldier with a white flag to the Germans, telling them that we refuse to fight civilians, but if we have to, we will. And we told them that unless they did stop within 2 hours, civilians stopped fighting, not the soldiers, that we would pull back further and reduce the city to rubble. Well, in 2 hours we attacked again, and of course they didn't. As a matter of fact, the Germans shot over 1,000 of their own people who were trying to escape. And they also shot a number of their own troops. There was an SS general, an Air Force general, who happened to get through and told us of it. And he said a good part of his men had already been shot by the SS. But what we did is we left one regiment behind to take care of Schaffenburg, and we proceeded on towards Bamberg and some of the other places. And that Schaffenburg was gradually reduced to rubble between the Air Corps and the tank fire and so forth. It was unfortunate, but the SS was, they're just crazy, you know. So after that, of course, things were a little easier. Went on to Bamberg, or you heard of Bamberg, and then of course we hit Nuremberg. That was Hitler's favorite spot. That's where they had that big field where every year the SS would assemble. They had the yearly meetings, and Hitler and Goering and Goebbels would preach to the people in this huge stadium. Well, again, we met the fanatics. And although Nuremberg was surrounded and everything else, they wouldn't give up. And again, we had to practically destroy the old, especially the old part of the city. It was a shame, but they knew the war was finished. Once we crossed the line, they knew the war was finished. But with such fanatics, Matter of fact, we got a copy of the message they sent to Hitler telling them that they were fighting gallantly there for Nuremberg and so forth. That there would always be in Germany and so forth and so on. But anyway, that passed on and we crossed the Danube. And the Danube wasn't bad. We proceeded on to Munich. And on our way towards Munich, we come to Dachau. So one regiment, the 157th, took Dachau. We were on the left. So we proceeded on to Munich. Now there are many stories about divisions, outfits claiming to have captured Dachau. But the Army still sticks by its terms of the 157th Infantry Regiment of the 45th Division took Dachau. Matter of fact, we could smell it as far away as we were. We could smell it. As a matter of fact, there was something like 21 railroad cars full of bodies just waiting there to be cremated. So you can imagine the stench that came from there. You didn't have to be in there. If you caught the wind coming from there, you could smell it. We had a problem too in taking Dachau. Some of the men when the soldiers seen the condition of the people, the prisoners and so forth, they went a little wild. And they did a little more shooting on the Germans than they should have. And they sort of cleaned out the SS, not completely, but the officers had to stop them, and it was just a natural reaction, We might be criticized for it, but it was a natural reaction from them. And we proceeded to Munich. Of course, coming into Munich at that time, the geography, Munich was right directly south. We proceeded from Schaffenburg, Bamberg, almost straight down towards Austria. We took Munich. When we took Munich, there were 3 divisions there. And the Corps said that as much as the 45th had the most time on the line in Europe, that we could just stay there and patrol Munich and let the other divisions get by. Just not enough road space for all the divisions because everything was crumbling. The other divisions went on right down into Italy and into the Brenner Pass. But meantime, we supposedly were to police Munich. Now, of course, I remember one of the first days we were supposed to patrol Munich. It was the late part of April, I think it was around April 29th and April 30th. Beautiful sunny day. And as we got into some parts of Munich, we had some beautiful parks. And lo and behold, in the parks were these scantily dressed Fräuleins sunbathing themselves. Well, I knew American soldiers, and so what I did is I got a hold of several German policemen and rounded them up and told them to round up the girls and tell them to put something on. I didn't mind. We were not supposed to fraternize with the Germans, but I knew that was something I couldn't prevent. Soldiers are soldiers and so forth. But I didn't want to drive the soldiers wild, seeing these half-naked women there. Some of the girls went and they'd come back, and of course, soldiers being soldiers, there was an awful lot of fraternization in Munich. But lo and behold, on the 7th of May, we realized something was going on. But we didn't know for sure. But our battalion arranged for a party, an officers' party. You've heard of the English Gardens in Munich. I'm sure you've heard of it. And so we went up to Dachau, and all the fellows from Oklahoma, they know how to butcher calves. They butchered a couple calves, and we had quite a feast there. We raided a German officers' club in downtown Munich, and had plenty of scotch and champagne, the finest French champagne that they stole from France. And we had a wild night that night. And of course, Germany had, Munich especially, had plenty of good beer. But we didn't worry about the beer. That night we had good scotch and some of the others. And the first thing we knew, it was VE Day. So from there we were sent down to Austria in the Brunn Pass. It's a small town down there. And most of the 45th Division. The 45th Division itself was preparing to go to Japan. But the men of the 45th were transferred into the 103rd Division in Austria. We took the Cactus Patch in addition to the Thunderbird Patch. And except for those that volunteered to go back to Japan. I volunteered, but the colonel got a hold of me. He says, here's your sense. He says, you were lucky to get through this one.
Yes.
What do you want? And so I quickly tore up my volunteer notice. And
how soon after that was it that you got home?
Yeah. Well, anyway, getting on to the 45th Division, I found it mentioned initially that the 45th Division was a National Guard division from Oklahoma, New Mexico, Colorado, and Arizona, and had a large number of Indians, about 7,000 to 8,000 Indians. And in World War I, they wore the patch, and lo and behold, the patch was a swastika. How the Germans ever got the swastika, I don't know. Now, in that part of our country, you'll find in a lot of the caves and underneath, you take the four or five corners down there between Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, you'll find many signs, Indian signs with the swastika. But of course, the division patch had to be changed. And they went to the Thunderbird, which is another Indian sign.
Yes.
And that looked a little better than swastika. But we finally did get to the shores here, and the nice part was when we proceeded up along Staten Island, along Shore Parkway. We passed Ambrose Lighthouse at first light, and we could see all the cars proceeding along the Parkway, Shore Parkway, as we were coming up the Narrows there. And in one morning, we saw more cars than we saw in all of Europe. Of course, they didn't have much gasoline over there. And since the men on the ship were mostly Westerners, of course, had some from New York, when they proceeded up the Hudson, they couldn't believe how pretty the Hudson was, with all the leaves, all the trees, and so forth. It was far prettier than the Rhine. And we stopped off at Camp Shanks. Passing Hastings here, there were a large contingent of people off Zinzer's there waving to us, and almost all the way along the line here, from up to Tarrytown. We stopped there in that little stretch of land that sticks out to the River Piedmont, and went to the smaller barges and transferred us out to that little neck of land. And then I went to Camp Shanks, and of course, that was the end of my service, except that the Army convinced me to join the reserves. Fortunately for me, the reserves commission expired just a couple months before Korea. Some of the fellows weren't that lucky. Billy Winstanley, who lived right there on High Street, and 5 kids, he had to go in, he was 101st Signal, and had to go to Korea. But our division was called back into Korea. The 45th Division went back into Korea. As a matter of fact, a lot of our former officers who were in there, their commissions didn't expire. And of course, they got nice, they resumed their National Guard duty, and their longevity continued on in the Army. And our Lieutenant Colonel got to be a full chicken colonel. And a lot of the lieutenants came out, majors and captains and so forth. It was quite a nice way for some of the fellows to retire on some good Army pay.
Yes. Well, tell me, did they have a parade here in Hastings for you?
Oh, no, there's nothing in Hastings for
they didn't have a parade for you, any of the returning soldiers? No.
We're only too glad to get home to see our people. We didn't need a parade. I mean, we're only too glad to make it, get home in one piece, and see some of our buddies and so forth. You know, that was happiness enough.
That's right.
Parades, and that's for the birds, you know. Even to this day, I have never gone in a parade after coming out of the service.
Well, I thank you very much, Mr. Wittman.